Howdy, y'all. Guess what? Last chapter of Jaikus and Reneeke Join the Guild. Yep, we are doing chapter 16 today. Then that concludes the reading of this book. Then once I get this chapter done, I will upload it to Smashwords and to Kindle, Amazon. At which point they should filter down to everybody. I've heard back from people who have bought through the Smashwords network, like Barnes & Noble and Apple, that they do, in fact, once I upload a new version, get their copy on their devices automatically updated when they log into their account. Kindle, I have not heard that yet. So, I would assume so, but I have not definitively heard that from anybody yet. And how would you know? Okay, when you go to the front of the book and scroll down, if it has a link to my YouTube and TikTok, you got the latest version, because I'm including that only on the newest ones. So if you scroll through and you see a link to TikTok or YouTube, then you know you have the latest version of The Unsuspecting Mage, Shepherd's Quest. Actually, I've done Fires of Prophecy too, because I did that as well. And then Adventures Guild will be starting the whole process of being uploaded later today or first thing in the morning on Sunday. So, well, here it is, chapter 16. The grand conclusion to Jaikus and Reneeke Join the Guild. And I appreciate everyone who stuck with me and who, and maybe 5 people, but so be it. I appreciate you guys. All right, chapter 16. Quiet conversation drew him from a realm rampant with very valiant deeds and daring do, to one of achy weariness. He tried lifting his arm to minister relief upon a rather itchy span covering most of his chest, but found even such a meager effort beyond his current capabilities. He did manage to raise his hand an inch above the woolen blanket before weakness drew it back. If he couldn't scratch, he just assumed sleep. Unfortunately, the voices continued unabated and kept him from descending past the final stage into the welcoming arms of slumber. Jaikus cracked an eye open to find Reneeke conversing at the foot of his bed with a man in priestly robes. How about find Reneeke at the foot of his bed conversing with a man in priestly robes? That sounds better. Renee? Voice cracking and hardly more audible than the squeak of a mouse, he failed to draw his friend's attention. He mustered more effort. Renee! 2 heads swiveled toward him. Reneeke broke into a wide grin and hurried to his side. Jake, praise the gods! The priest joined him at Jaikus' bedside. I thought he might awaken today. Thank you, Father Belici. You are welcome, my son. Stepping forward, he passed a hand over Jaikus' chest, then paused momentarily above his head. He still requires much sleep. Keep your visit brief. Yes, Father. The priest gave Jaikus a grin. I shall leave you in the hands of your friend. As the priest departed, Reneeke sat on the edge of the bed. Man, we didn't think you were going to survive. We? Reneeke nodded. Charka, Lady Kate, and Father Belici. Even Seward stopped by once he recovered to see how you were doing. Seward? He asked in disbelief. Reneeke chuckled. I know. Couldn't believe it myself when he appeared. 3 other cots shared the room with his. 2 were empty, each having a single, neatly folded blanket perfectly situated at the ends. The 4th looked to have been slept in, as his blanket was rumpled with half of it dangling over the side to the floor. Where am I? Fierl's temple in Rekla, Reneeke quipped. Fierl, god of earth, was one of the more popular and prolific faiths in the realm. The people knew that if they were ever in need, succor could be found within its walls and at a reasonable price. The very poor rarely had to pay for the simpler healings. For care of a more serious nature, healing such as being brought back from the dead or the removal of a curse, Payment of one kind or another had to be given. Most temples accepted industry as well as gold. If a person could not meet the required sum, the temple offered them the chance to perform a needed service. Often, such services required nothing more than helping to keep the grounds clean or minor maintenance. The priests of Fierro turned no one away. Perhaps that explained Fierro's position as a patron god of adventurers. I'm not dead then? It was close, Jake. If it hadn't been for Charka appearing with the Kudari brothers and a magic user when he did, neither one of us would be here. Kudari brothers? They're friends of Charka. You'll get to meet them later. Nice fellows to have on your side in a tight situation. A lad attired as a novice of Fierro arrived bearing a cup of cool water. Their conversation took a brief hiatus while the lad aided Jaikus in raising so he could drink. Once the cup had been emptied, the novice laid him back down. Then the lad glanced to Reneeke. Father Belici said your friend needs to rest. Reneeke nodded. I understand. I shall leave momentarily. The lad nodded, then gave each a brief bow before departing. Jaikus gazed upon his friend. How are you? I'm fine. Indicating with a quick nod toward the rumpled cot next to Jake's, he added, 2 days of rest have done me a world of good. 2 days? Yep, 2 days. His expression grew solemn. You were hurt pretty bad, Jake. Real bad. I feel like it. Every part of him ached in one manner or another. His chest was heavily bandaged, as was his head and arms. I thought priests could do a better job than this. Reneeke grinned again. They can, if they must. But the way Father Belici explained it, a few aches and pains are good for the soul. I'd rather do without them if it's all the same. Seeing the novice standing not far away, giving him a disapproving glare, Reneeke rose from the cot. I better let you sleep before that novice comes over here again. Yawning, Jaikus nodded and closed his eyes. I could use more anyway. I shall return later. I'm glad you're all right, Jake. But Jaikus had already fallen asleep. Another day of convalescing, Father Belici announced Jaikus fit to leave. Though from Jaikus' point of view, he was anything but ready. It took Reneeke's help for him to get up off the cot, and every step produced pain. About the only place that didn't hurt was his left nostril. No, wait, that hurt too. Come on, Jake, Reneeke said as they left the cot behind. Charka wants to buy us an ale over at the guild. The guild? You had forgotten all about that. Are we in? Not yet. Apparently they are still considering it. Oh, disappointment filled his voice. But hey, we get to go in since we will be Charka's guests. Inside the guild. You can settle for that, at least for now. They made their way through the temple and out to the street. Oh, and we have some coins too. Your share of the trip to Scythel? That, and Master Heimel's bonus for recovering his reagents. He was very grateful. The news piqued Jaikus' interest. How grateful? 60 golds. Jaikus almost passed out right then and there. 60? That was twice the bonus he had originally offered. That was more money than his family could ever hope to earn in a decade. Maybe 2. True 60? Truly? Yep. Apparently, we brought back his reagents in such condition that all remained viable, or something like that. And there's more. More? Remember that glow moth larva I removed from your arm? He shuddered. How could I forget? The band of newly grown skin over the area Reneeke had dug the larva from was one of the more vocal of the voices in the chorus of aches. Well, as it turned out, the troll that almost killed you had been infested with them. The guild has a standing order for larvae of the glow moth, and since we were instrumental in leading it to capture, received a percentage of the take. We're rich! Not exactly. Casting a sidelong glance at Reneeke, Jaikus frowned. What do you mean? Well, there was the amount we owed Charka for your indiscretion. The Kudari brothers received a share since they helped bring the troll down. Also, that magic user I mentioned received a full third. I don't know why. You'll have to talk to Charka about that. Then, we had to pay the healers, time spent under their care, and, pausing a moment, he searched his memory for the final item. Oh right, let's not forget the supplies we got from Bella. How much is left? Jaikus' hopes of being rich were quickly being dashed upon the rocks of fiscal reality. Together we have 10 golds, 7 silver, and 11 copper. Sounding less than excited, he asked, "That's it?" Reneeke laughed. "That's it? Back on the farm, such an amount would be considered a fortune. And you ask, that's it?" So yes, you rarely think about such things when you're playing a game or Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, every little bit chips away at the fiscal reality. And I wanted these guys. It's more fun when you don't have a lot of money and gold. I've always found, you got to pick and choose what you get, what you buy, and you slowly gain in power. Because once you become uber powerful, what's the fun in that? If you can just kill everything, what's the fun in that? Like when I play Skyrim. I love Skyrim. Once I get to like level 70 or something, and I have full-on dragon armor with double enchantments, I can kill everything. There's very little challenge left after that. It's just going through the paces. And so I usually start over. Okay. Up ahead, the walls of the guild came into view. Out front stood the one-armed man who, during the last encounter, had kept them out. Think he'll let us in? Don't worry, Jake. Like I said, we're Charka's guests. Jaikus wasn't convinced, but when they came to the door, Gerald, aka Booba, merely nodded and opened it for them. Exhilarated beyond words, Jaikus leaned heavily upon Reneeke as they passed from the world of everyday life to that of sagas and epics. His knees grew wobbly as they entered the foyer, itself a small room. To one side sat a counter, beyond which a rather scruffy-looking man dug beneath his fingernails with the point of a knife. In the area behind the man stood shelves and hooks bearing all manners of items, from simple cloaks to saddles, and before they passed from the foyer into the main meeting hall of the guild, Jaikus thought he had observed 3 heads of a less than human nature. Despite its size, the hall bore more of a tavern atmosphere than of a revered meeting place that had been the launching point for many a famous tale. Laughter, the clanking of flagons, a shout here and there all added to the cacophony. Tables filled the hall, each packed with men and women dressed in armor, robes, and everything in between. Even a few non-human races were represented, races that Jaikus had heard about only in epics. Servants in the uniform of the guild worked their way amongst the tables, delivering flagons of ale and trays of food. No less than 6 arched avenues gave egress to the rest of the guild. 2 sets of steps, one to either side of the hall, ascended to the floor above. Far to the right, at the head of the hall, sat a dais, stage really, whereupon bards and other performers could entertain. What really drew his attention was a double-headed battle axe prominently displayed above the dais. Reckless axe, over 1,000 years ago, and yet there it was. "Greetings, friends." Coming out of nowhere like it did, the salutation caused Jaikus to jump. "It's just Chork." Chork? Glancing around, he saw no one, only a bronze statue of a fully armored fighter situated just within the great hall. He received his second shock when the statue's eyes blinked. "That's me," the statue clarified. "What?" "Long story," Jaikus explained. "I'll tell you later. Welcome to the Adventurers Guild, young Jaikus. Reneeke and I have shared many a tale concerning your exciting exploits." "It talks?" Jaikus glanced to Reneeke, but his friend was busy scanning the faces of those seated at the many tables spaced throughout the hall. "Talk? Of course I talk." Its eyes flitted to and fro, and then the lips moved when it spoke. That appeared to be the extent of Chork's mobility. "In fact, I would have you know that I speak over a dozen languages, including that of the now extinct race of Tillians, though for the most part they had very little to say, as they did but drift along with the ocean currents. Did you know they have, or I suppose I should say had, 17 separate and distinct ways in which to say hello? No, I didn't. Well, now, let me illuminate you." As he began an ear-piercing series of shrieks, Reneeke spotted Charka over at a table against the wall. "Sorry, Chork. Charka is expecting us." Immediately, the shrieking stopped. "No problem at all, young Reneeke. I'm sure your friend and I can resume our conversation at a later date." "I suppose so." "Wonderful! I will count the minutes until I have the pleasure of your company." Hurrying Jaikus toward where their friend sat, Reneeke said, "He'll talk and talk and talk if you don't walk away." Chork. I like Chork. he was an adventurer who got turned to bronze at some point in the distant past, and people have been trying to turn him back to human ever since, but nothing's ever worked out. And if you think about it, a bronze statue of a guy who never sleeps is the perfect sentinel to keep an eye on things when no one's around. About to question his friend further, he was forestalled when Charka noticed their approach and waved them over. "Good to see you up and about, lad." "Thank you. I'm glad to be here." Few tables offered more than one vacant place. Even Charkas held only the 2 empty seats that Jaikus and Reneeke were soon occupied. 3 others, aside from Charka and his crew, shared the table. 2 were the Kadari brothers, and the third was a wiry little fellow known as Slip. From the slightness of his build and the lack of armor and magic user's robe, Jaikus deduced that he must be one of the guild's thieves. Slip eyed the 2 newcomers. "Heard about your fight." Curl, the axe-wielding Kadari brother, slapped the table. "Stood up to a troll, he did." "Impressive," the wiry little guy nodded approvingly. Lady Kate laid a hand on Jaikus' arm. "How are you doing?" He flashed her a grin. "I'm alive." "Ha!" Turl, the sword-wielding Kudari twin, slapped the table and gave out with a loud and raucous laugh. "Then you have just met the first law of adventuring." "What is that?" "You come back alive." He and his brother Curl repeatedly slapped the table as they broke into laughter. Jaikus glanced to Reneeke, wondering if he might have understood the joke, but his friend looked just as confused. Returning his gaze to Charka, Jaikus said, "Thank you for inviting us. I've always wanted to see what it was like inside." Raising his mug of cult in salute, Charka silently grinned before downing half of it. Moving upon the platform at the head of the hall, caught Reneke's attention. 3 men had mounted the 4 steps leading to it and were even now making their way to center stage. They didn't look like any performers Reneeke had ever seen. 2 were heavily armored, while the third, though he wore a simple suit of leather armor, had the bearing of command. Charka took note of Reneke's interest in the stage. "Looks like old Elantho plans on giving another speech." Both Kadari brothers groaned. "That's why I don't like spending my time here. It's more fun over at the Dented Helm." Taking on a sour expression, Seward said, "You got that right." Charka eyed the trio with annoyance. "Show some respect. He is the guildmaster, and if he likes to make speeches, then we should at least do him the courtesy of listening. You just might learn something." Seward rolled his eyes before turning them on Reneeke. "His last speech was on the best way to take down a specter." "Wouldn't that be worth knowing?" asked Reneeke. "From the other side of the grave? According to him, the best way is to become one yourself." "That's..." began Jaikus, then paused. He didn't want to run the risk of offending anyone by speaking ill of the highest-ranking guild member. "Stupid?" finished Curl. Jaikus glanced at those around him, then nodded. "Don't worry, lad. Few around here will think ill of you for knocking Elantho's words of wisdom." Over on the stage, the guildmaster raised his hands. Conversations died, heads turned toward him, and the hall quieted. Jaikus glanced at Charka, only to have his one-time leader place a finger before his lips, indicating quiet. "Greetings, my fellow adventurers." Elantho's arms lowered as his gaze roved across his nimble faces. "We have business here tonight." "No speech?" came a shout from the back. The guildmaster shook his head. "No, not tonight." Thunderous applause drowned out the rest of his words. He flashed an annoyed look to those in the crowd, subduing their outbursts and restoring a sense of propriety. Once the noise level diminished to a respectable level, he continued. "As I said, we have business here tonight, and I shall keep my comments brief. Another round of applause and table thumping. Honor and bravery have ever been the hallmarks of our beloved guild. Only those who exemplify these attributes can ever hope of joining our exalted ranks." Slip glanced at Charka. "Sounds like a vote's about to happen." Charka shrugged. "Perhaps." Transferring his gaze from Elantho to Slip, Reneeke asked, "A vote?" "Whenever someone wishes to join the guild, they put it to a vote. At that time, those who object are allowed to come forth and state their case. Once everyone has had their say, we vote. Most times," added Carol, "there are no objections, and this is merely a formality." Terrell chuckled. "Remember when Cog tried to join? No less than 45 members stood in objection. almost caused a riot. Did he get in? Queried Jaikus. Carol shook his head. Not then. Later, though, he proved himself by slaying the Glen River raptor, brought the beast's head back, and chucked it at the guildmaster. Such temerity demanded that he be allowed to join. None blocked his entry after such a display of courage. Wonder who's up for the vote, Slip mused. Very interested in the inner workings of the guild, Jaikus returned his attention back to the guildmaster. His eyes flicked to and fro in an attempt to discover who may be the lucky one to join. Reneeke, on the other hand, turned a knowing look toward Charka. The troop leader failed to meet his eye. A growing murmur throughout the hall made Guildmaster Elantho difficult to hear. Jaikus tried to listen, but the growing buzz of speculation proved too obstructive. He continued to scan the assemblies. He couldn't for the life of him see anyone that appeared more anxious than the rest. Finally, the murmuring grew too loud, and the guildmaster once again signaled for quiet. Jaikus turned his attention from the crowd back to the guildmaster and found Elantho staring in his direction. Now, I believe Charka, leader of Charka's troop, a long-time and respected member of the guild, would like to say a few words. Every eye in the hall turned toward their table as Charka stood. Jaikus listened in shocked surprise as Charka began to speak. You all know me. I've been around long enough to remember some of you as Springers. That elicited a murmuring chuckle. A couple probably should still be Springers. More laughter and several guffaws followed. During my last venture into the swamp, I had the privilege to get to know a couple lads who may have had more desire than brains when it came to adventuring. But let me tell you, they acquitted themselves with great courage. And like you, courage is the attribute I admire most in any individual. Mistakes were made, for what Springer knows a troll from a hole in the ground? But they righted the wrongs, went forward into the unknown, and never backed down. When faced with death, they stood their ground. When faced with entombment, they found the way out. These lads may come from modest stock, but they have the spirit of adventurers. When my man, Seward, was grievously hurt and had to be rushed back to Rekla, they went alone into the swamp to retrieve items stolen by a fully grown mossback. More in takes a breath. Not only did they return to tell the tale, but they recovered that which I believed irretrievable. Eyes that had turned upon Charka now turned toward Jaikus and Reneeke. Between their youthful appearance and Jaikus being all but mummified, everyone understood of whom Charka spoke. Over the last 2 days, you've heard the tale of their last heroic deed, facing the wrath of a maddened troll infested with glowmoth larvae. Many in the audience nodded, while others who hadn't heard the tale spouted expletives. I am not the only one who can attest to the bravery of these two lads. The Kadari brothers, Viruloxi, Master Heimel, the apothecary, and over half a dozen guards who watched from atop the wall as the events unfolded, witnessed their heroic deed. Turl and Carol nodded in affirmation. If ever two individuals deserve to be accorded the honor of joining the guild, assuredly it must be them. Jaikus was completely taken aback. Charka glanced toward his former Springers. Stand up, lads. Aches and pains melted away as Jaikus rose from his chair. Reneeke offered him a hand, but he shrugged it off with a shake of his head. Making it to his feet, he stared at the men and women looking his way. Many bore grins, others gave nods. Not one held a negative expression. From the stage, Elantho raised his voice and asked, "What say you? Do we welcome these lads? Do we welcome these brave lads into the guild?" Silence hung in the hall for what seemed an interminable time. For a brief instant, fear and doubt sought to squelch the exhilaration of the moment. But it was thunderously thrust aside as 100 voices shouted, "Yes." All right, then that's it. They're in. Yeah, that was a good book. I was on a roll when I wrote that one. I always worry that when I start a book, I'm not going to be able to keep it going, keep it interesting. Of course, Dark Shores that just came out. Everyone says it was really good, so I'm assuming I've still got it. I hope the newest ones coming out continue to be of interest. So that's it. I am going to start the Fires of Prophecy tomorrow, book 2 of the Warside Saga. I'm gonna get Buy Me a Coffee started, so those who don't want to buy my books but want to listen can still support me. And maybe I'll be able to, between that and my regular sale, be able to justify putting on here for free, books that I would charge for elsewhere. Well, let me know what you think. I'm always interested. And please share is always good. Share will, if you share it every time, that will always get the word out to everybody you know and possibly others. So, all right, I'll get this finalized and up to hopefully your devices, and I'll see you in the morning.